kind of list of comment, pick a question, and say, man, I wasn't thinking about that. Just let it kind of haunt me in a good way. So we're going to continue on in that vein today, but I want to just have you guys think about this quote by that's at the top of that little thing that we gave you, and it says this: at the end of the day, think about this. At the end of the day, the questions that we ask of ourselves, or I would even say the questions that we're willing to ask of ourselves, actually determine the type of people that we will become. The kinds of questions you and I are willing to ask of myself, and to be honest with myself, will actually have a lot to do with the kind of person that you and I will become. Because I think at certain times in our lives, we can be afraid to ask certain questions. It's too vulnerable. It's too revealing. Sometimes we can be too like, I don't know if I want to go there. So last week, we're in the process, this 10-week series, the first 6 weeks of taking a look at questions of the master teacher. And one of the things in ancient Israel that the rabbis would do to teach wasn't just to teach, though they did that some, they would often ask questions. So let me ask you briefly, what do you think the power of asking a question is? Why would that be such a good tool to help somebody learn? Any thoughts on that? Just quick reactions, not right or wrong. I know it's early, but we're awake. You just have one cup of coffee. Yeah, thank you, Randy.
You shape the discussion.
Real loud. Say what?
The discussion.
You shape the discussion. How so? How would it shape the discussion?
You get to choose to ask the question.
Okay.
You wonder the.
All right. So you can somehow kind of lead the discussion in that way. You get to shape it. What's another benefit of a question? Yeah, thank you, Zach.
Lord asked questions. That's how he talked.
Talk to people. So when he did, why would he do that? Why would he ask a question? You ever ask somebody a question and just look at you like,
It makes the other person think about their answer.
It makes you think about your answer a little bit, right? You don't just kind of, and then here's the real stumper. Ask a question when they give you the answer to the question. Ask another question. Then you go, I thought I answered the question. Well, you did, but here's another question based on that question. And all of a sudden, you just take things a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. Dave?
I mean, how many times are you go to grab a day of the whole thing? Right? You get messages all the time, but I think a question stands out because it doesn't happen as much.
It doesn't happen as much.
A whole lot of things.
Yeah.
But it actually takes time to ask, and they're waiting, but they want to know.
Yeah, so think how honoring a question is. We're being told things all the time. And so I say, hey, what do you think about that? Well, what about that? Just imagine asking your kids if you're dad and you still have any kind of a say in your kid's life, and they don't look at you like, oh, dude, like you're waiting on myself. But I mean, to ask them a question, you start like, let me ask you this, or sweetie, what were you thinking about that? Like, what would motivate that? It's pretty deep. Here's one of the things we also realize: that the question sometimes really isn't the question. That the issue sometimes isn't always the issue, and the problem that we think is the problem isn't always the problem. Meaning, we deal with it on one level. Remember the iceberg again last week. Above the waterline, we think, I got it. But when you pursue it a little deeper, it's like, man, I don't know. So last week, we asked this profound question. Jesus did. Do you remember what it was?
What do you want?
What do you want? And we went into that. He asked some different versions of that. He asked the guy that was paralytic for 38 years, do you want to get well? Pretty interesting question. This is another way to say, what do you want? Two blind men one day, same question. When the Pharisees came and got him, he goes, who do you want? Like, who are you looking for? And there are realities to these things. And I drew a little dot on the board just for the sake of it, just to remind you guys. I'm going to use the space for a little bit. And I said, okay, this is the one button. You get a chance to push that button one time, and you can get what you want when you push that button. But the closer you get, I guarantee you're going to start thinking a whole lot more about what you actually want. John?
I just want to remind everybody that last week we realized that what you want was another way of saying what you need in Christ. That's very profound. So
a lot of times we think what we want is a surface level. Again, the question isn't always a question. You think a little deeper. Jesus said, what do you want? Like, he's really making you ponder. What's the essence of your life? What do you really desire? What do you really need? What's going on? This is a big thing. So we're going to continue to talk about it. But today, I want to kind of lead us to a place where we're going to talk about question number 2. Again, different people have different takes on this, but it's so, Jesus has somewhere around 300 questions in the gospel. That's a lot. He was called the master interrogator. You don't think about it that much, but he asked a lot of questions. Yeah, a lot.
Hey, so on that question, the one that do you want to get well?
Yeah,
On its face seems like, stupid question.
sure it does.
Of course he wants to get well, right?
Yeah,
But the deeper you probe it, the deeper the question is, and even the one, what do you want? On surface is like, why are you asking that? What do you want? But when you pierce it, it really does get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
It's interesting how superficially it doesn't seem deep, but in reality, they're very penetrating questions.
I was down at Help Me Up again yesterday, and I wish you guys, if you ever want to have a very amazing, life-building encounter, just call me 1 week and go, Goody, can I go with you down to Help Me? And you can go. And you'll sit in a couple classes, and these are some of the most honest guys you'll ever be around. And yesterday, we really were getting into it. And it really came down at one point, I literally put, hey, what do you think this really comes down to? So why are you in here? And how many of you do this stuff again? These are amazing men. You know, and we're going to talk about that more in a little bit. But so it really comes down to, okay, you're here, but what do you want? And when you really start dealing with it, the room gets quiet because it's like, I thought I wanted this, but to get what I said I wanted is going to mean that I've got to do some hard work that I don't know how to do, or it's going to take me places where I feel a little uncomfortable for a while. I feel a little guilt or embarrassment or shame or whatever it is, but I say I want this. Well, here's the deal. Remember we said you not only have to want what you want, you also have to want what your wants lead to. And sometimes even when you want a good thing, to get that thing, there's consequences, which means my life may change. Sometimes you think, well, it's a lot easier to be crazy than it is to be healthy. Not really, but when you're good at it and you're used to it, because one thing addiction does, it makes your world really teeny. The only thing you're thinking about every day is you and getting what it is you think you need to want. And again, it's not just drinking and drugging, it can be anything. So here's a question I want to ask you, just to ponder for a second, and we're going to try to make up a little time here. I want you to, just 30 seconds, think about this one. Can you think of a time in your life where you felt invisible to other people? Don't answer yet. Or maybe when you felt devalued or shunned or put aside for some reason. Can you remember a time in your life when you basically felt invisible to other people, or shunned, or maybe devalued for some reason? Just think of that for just 30 seconds, okay? That's not our question, by the way, today, but it's going to lead into our question. A number of years ago, my wife and I, with Young Life, had a chance to go to France and do some work with a group. And we were there for 3 weeks with another dear friend. And I remember, I don't speak French. And I remember going in a room with all these people, and they were just talking away, man. And I was like standing there looking like, I could be naked in the corner, nobody's gonna know I'm here. I mean, I've never felt so invisible in my whole life. And I couldn't participate because I didn't know how to speak the language. And at that point, nobody kind of knew that I couldn't speak the language. So they weren't really engaging with me very much. But it was one of the weirdest feelings I've ever had in my life. And here I am as a human being, and I have no capacity to enter in. It was weird. And it felt kind of odd in a real way. Anybody else had any experience like that? You felt, anybody had one or two you want to share that when you had an experience where maybe you have felt invisible or devalued or incredibly misunderstood? Very quickly, have a thought? Yeah, Josh, go ahead, real loud.
I think it's high school, and I had a pimple on my forehead, and I knew it was there, and I knew it was big, but one of my friends, also my friend, thought it was cool to point it out. And it was like this cascade of events.
Wow.
As much as I told myself it didn't bother me, as much as I told myself it wasn't a big deal, inside I'm like, I am so embarrassed. Because I am the only person in the world that's,
Wow.
I mean,
Anybody relate to that? You ever bring a flaw into public? And you just wonder what people are seeing about it or treating you that way? You know? I think a lot of us, you know, in this room, like, you know, Gregory, you know, you've been limping around, you had some reconstructive surgery on your foot. You know, it was probably a lot easier to get around before you had that, right? I mean, it changes things. Then I think about people who live a certain way every single day. And it's like people look past them. Here's a really strong thought. When was the last time any of us stopped long enough to have a good conversation with somebody that A, made you feel uncomfortable, or B, was homeless? I don't mean just passing, I mean a human valuing conversation that starts with this. Hey, what's your name? What's your name? Here's why I ask this. Few things are worse as a human being than feeling invisible or devalued or overlooked. Would you agree with that? And I know that's true for me. And maybe sometimes because of the perception people have of us, or maybe even if you've done something that might at some level be a reason or an understandable reason for some kind of response that you might get from people, but somehow maybe what you did or have done gets lost in what you did. Excuse me, who you are as a human being gets lost in what you did. Or maybe who you are as a human being gets lost in what you are incapable of doing. You just don't get invited. I know in Young Life, a number of years ago, when Young Life began to open up all that we were doing with young people to kids with disabilities, it was a whole new watershed. And one of the things you begin to realize is those people, those young human beings, want everything else that an able-bodied person wants. And somehow we think, well, gosh, so then you go overboard to make it possible. Now you got kids up in the trees doing zip lines, ropes courses, and all they need is a little more help. But you kind of look past it for a while. And it's just been so amazingly life-giving. But I know this, that people are often devalued or minimized because of things that they've done, right? Like, let's think of some reasons it might cause people to be devalued or overlooked real quick. Just real quick, so I want to show you something here. Any ideas? Let's just name some.
Appearance.
What's that?
Appearance.
Appearance, for sure. Keep going. A disability, okay?
Social status.
Status, social status, you got that one right. How about age? You ever had a conversation where people are talking about things you're going to go do, and they look at you and then they look away? You're not saying that ain't happening to you. You know? How about some other things that maybe are reasons where people get overlooked, devalued, or minimized? Weight, height, bodily appearance. Somebody said, I think smell. Somebody said, or social status, however that might be. How about maybe one or two more?
Skin color.
Skin color. Thank you, Monty. Or skin color.
Affiliation,
Affiliation meaning?
like Redskins fan.
Oh, thank you. Or staying your team up. I mean, this is kind of crazy though, right? I got to go to the Ravens game Monday night, which I literally didn't sleep. I was so jacked when I got home from that. I've never been having I just felt like electricity was running. I was sitting in bed at 12:30. Oh, this is not good. But you know, some Chiefs fans were walking around, you know, for a while. So like, dude, like, I don't know if I'd be doing that here. It was like you feel these kind of things. But this is think about this though. I want you to see that feeling seen. If we have that quote, you can put that up there, Eric. Listen, feeling seen, meaning valued, desired, validated, assigned worth. Those are just other synonyms for trying to be what it means to be seen is crucial, is it not? To the mental, emotional, and overall well-being of a person. Feeling seen, valued, desired is one of the greatest things and gifts that we can give to any other human being. And you have a seat at the table. Some of you have had little kids and you realize that your kid, when they're little, they are just fast. They're struggling. Our second daughter, Jessica, when she was born, she was 2 pounds. And she was always very little, and you know, when she finally started getting it, she had to wear an eye patch, and she's 37 now, 2 kids, but she had frizzy red hair, an eye patch, and a heel brace on, and she would walk around, you know, and Betsy and I would see her walking around, and we'd go like, oh my gosh, to us, she couldn't have been more dear, but it's like, she's gonna take some shots because of that. There's gonna be other little kids that might say some things to her because of that. And she's not gonna always feel valued and seen over things she can't control. And I'll tell you, our compassion meter went way up on these kinds of things. Dave, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, so I can relate to Josh's story. So I had the acne, I had broken glasses in high school, and so later, you know, many years later, when I finally met the woman who would become my wife, this very thing was how I knew she was going to be my wife.
Wow.
Because, you know, as we're standing there talking, something would come out of my mouth, and you know, and I internally I'm thinking, oh, I'm stupid, I shouldn't have said that. And yet she was standing there, just still engaged in the conversation. She didn't go to the bathroom. And so I've always said her greatest gift to me was to be myself.
I want to show you a movie clip from Hidden Figures.
Hey, Matt,
Yeah, real quick, yeah,
I can think of,
real loud.
times when a person might want to be overlooked.
Yeah,
When I was growing up, I was very reticent, and I tried to blend in the background as much as I could. I've changed a little bit since then. But I wanted to be overlooked because when I was noticed, I usually got bullied.
so think about this. You said you wanted to be overlooked. What about this, John? What if you could have been not overlooked and valued for the right reasons?
That
You
was
see,
great.
that would have been great. Different question. See, here's a question. Say, I want to be overlooked. Question. Is that what you really wanted?
That's what I thought I wanted at the time when I was an elementary school child. That's right.
Yeah, right. But what if you could have been an elementary school child and been valued in whatever you felt was the wrong thing? You could have been included, not ostracized.
Might have been picked earlier when they were choosing.
Yeah, all of those things. Here's the thing I want to say to you. Those kind of memories too, they come back every now and then and knock on the door of what's going on. They just show up in bigger boy issues in our life. I'm telling you. Here's, I've said this a million times, we don't want to go there today. It's really possible to have a big boy body and be walking around with little boy emotions. It's great. I want to show you a clip. It's very profound from the movie Hidden Figures. So take a look at this. It's about 2.5 minutes. Let's make sure that volume's up, Josh. How about that? What I need you to do. It's not my imagination. Where the hell did you go every day? Lift it up, more, Josh.
To the bathrooms.
The bathroom. To the damn bathroom. 40 minutes a day? What are you doing? I'm serious. I put a lot of faith in you.
There's no bathroom for me here.
What do you mean there's no bathroom for you?
There is no bathroom. There are no colored bathrooms in this building or any building outside the West Campus, which is half a mile away. Did you know that? I have to walk to Timbuktu just to relieve myself. And I can't use one of the handy bikes. Picture that, Mr. Harrison. My uniform, skirt below my knees, my heels, simple string of pearls. Well, I don't own pearls. Lord knows you don't pay color enough to afford pearls. And I work like a dog, day and night, living off a coffee from a pot. None of you touch. So, excuse me if I have to go to the restroom a few times a day.
There you have it. No more public restrooms. No more white restrooms. Just plain old toilets. Go wherever damn the police, preferably close to your desk. Here at NASA, we all pay the same color. Here's some lights back to us. What are you guys thinking? What are you feeling right now? Any thoughts? That was awesome. What made it awesome, man? Sense of justice? Yeah. Makes you feel good. How long do you think that lady in her life wanted to say those words?
Stones it took for her to stand up. Say
What-
that.
What's that, John?
The stones it took for her to stand up and say that to the shot possible with all those men.
Yeah. And how long does it take to be overlooked and devalued because of what in this instance? Anything here on our list? Any appearance, status? Yes, you guys ever been in a room? You're the only white guy? You feel weird? You used to or not used to? Like African American brothers, you're in a room with white guys all the time. This isn't the kind of thing, I'm just saying, we miss people. It bothers me about me that I've missed people. Here's a crazy thing, I wouldn't be standing here today if a few people didn't make darn sure they didn't miss me. Because had they missed me, I don't know that I'd be standing here right now. And here's why I want to talk about this, because Jesus didn't miss me. That's what I love about it. So let's turn, I want to read you Luke chapter 7, and I want to ask us a question and look at it before we have some time on the tables. Okay? Just a little context, Jesus is at the point in his journey, wherever you're at in the scriptures, it's okay, just stick with us. And he's starting to wrestle the religion, or wrestle up the religious community, which I just love that he's doing. He's starting to aggravate them a little bit in a good way and starting to shake the apple cart. John the Baptist had come onto the scene and they didn't really understand him. And so let's just start at verse 33 of chapter 7. It says, now John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you, meaning the religious leaders or Pharisees, you say that he has a demon. And the Son of Man, meaning Jesus, came eating and drinking, and you say he's a glutton and drunkard, and a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Don't you love that about Jesus? Like, how do you get to be called a drunkard, a tax collector, and a friend of sinners? Do you actually know how you get that reputation? Anybody? You hang around those people, right? It's like, I don't know why, but this is the God guy doing crazy things, amazing things, but we see him hanging around people that we just don't think you ought to be hanging around. Basically is seeing, validating people that we don't think are worth being seen or validated. Goes on, says, now one of the Pharisees, get this is kind of good, invited Jesus to have dinner with him. So you need to understand this, in the Middle Eastern culture back then, to do this it was something very honoring and intimate, and yet the motives here, we don't totally know them because this situation gets blown up in just a short period of time. But it says Jesus, when he gets invited, Jesus goes to where the Pharisee's house is, and in the room, who do you think might be there? Other Pharisees. And maybe a couple of Jesus' disciples, we're not totally sure, but the Pharisees, they're inviting Jesus. Pharisees of their day were sort of the seminary teachers. They were guys that had the extra edge on the laws of God, the traditions, the oral understanding. And when people wanted to have a God thought or a God understanding, they would often go to them. So get this. It says, so they go to the Pharisees' house and recline at the table. Get this. When a woman who had lived a sinful life in that town, learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. Now, let me ask you this. If she was isn't it interesting that Luke writes, a woman who lived what kind of life? What do you guys imagine that to be? Maybe prostitution, maybe immorality, maybe drugs. You know, in that day, you could be sinful too if you were thought of just being on the outskirts. Could have been poor, could have been a certain part of town. Behavior was certainly related to it. But let me ask you, if you're a woman in that culture and you're going into a room full of men, how do you think she would feel? Minimized. Let me ask you, we're going to see this in a minute. What would ever compel you to go into that room? If you ever had a room you did not want to go in, you already have a reputation. And with the religious leaders, it only takes it up and makes it that much worse. But she brings an alabaster jar of perfume. Get this. Just imagine the atmosphere, what this must have felt like. And here's what you need to understand. When they used to eat in those days, the tables were low and they would sit on the table. Literally, you would lay on and go on one elbow and your head would be at the table and your feet would be at the other end. And so around the table would be basically just a bunch of kind of bodies laid out on a shoulder with your face at the table. You weren't just kind of sitting like we are right here. But this woman, it says, she stood behind Jesus at his feet, and what is she doing? No, not yet. She's doing something first. She's crying. How many of you guys feel comfortable when a woman just starts crying? Even if it's your wife, it's like, oh, this could be not good. Or it's like, okay, I'm asking myself, what are these tears about? Sometimes somebody starts crying, you go like, what do you want? What are you crying for? What are you crying about? Here's what I know, tears mean something. She's weeping. We're going to see this in a minute. And it's not because she's sad. Here's what I want you to imagine. What would compel a woman with a reputation, so many things wrong culturally, going into a room with religious leaders, with Jesus there, and all of a sudden she comes up to Jesus and she's crying at his feet? What would compel you to do that? It doesn't stop there. We'll unpack this. And she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, and she, what? If you're Jesus, you feel this is a little weird? He welcomes this. I mean, somebody kissing your feet, an immoral woman. Jesus knows a rabbi, a religious leader. He doesn't say, no, we're not doing that today. He actually allows it and welcomes her, and then she pours perfume on them. Here's what you need to understand. There's so much more going on here. Jesus is risking everything in this encounter, in this culture, with this woman. Number one, you would never let a woman touch you in public. Ever. When she took her hair down and wiped it with her feet, women kept their hair up and covered because it was seen potentially as something sensual and could cause arousal. She literally takes her hair down in a room filled with religious leaders who understand that tradition, and Jesus lets her hair actually touch his feet, and he welcomes her. Get this. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man is a prophet, he would know, get this. What's the next word? Who is touching him? And what's the next phrase? What kind? What kind? Who and what kind of person she is. That she is a sinner. Oh. She's just a who and a what kind. Kind of invisible, right? Get this, I love this. See, Jesus said to him, Simon, don't you wish you could just hear his tone of voice? I love this. I don't think it was like, Simon, I have something to say to you. I think it was like, Simon, I have something to say to tell you. Go tell me, teacher. 2 men owed money, and a certain money lender owed them 500 denarii, the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay back, so he canceled the debts of both men. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon said, well, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt canceled. Jesus said, you have judged correctly. Then he left. Turned toward the woman, talking to Simon, and he goes, Simon, this is so bad. Here's the question, you ready? Simon, do you see this woman? Oh my gosh. She's gone from being this immortal sinner that nobody wants to be, and God's the one to run to. Do you see this woman? Of course they see her. No. Do you see her? Because see, what you see, you don't see. You don't see what I see. Because what I see is someone who sees me the way I'm really meant to be seen, and you who should know this are completely blind. How do I know that? Jesus says this to him. Simon, you see this woman, for see, I came into your house. This is just basic common courtesy in that day. You did not give me any water for my feet. It's like somebody coming into your house and you're not offering them something to eat or drink or something like that. So she not only gave me water, she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she's poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, Simon, it was awesome. Jesus says, her many sins. He doesn't negate that she's not a sinner. He says, let's bring it on. Her many sins. Yeah. Or what? Get this. For she loved much. But he who has been forgiven little loves little. I think he's saying, hey, Simon, you know what? You got a lot going on. You don't even know, dude. And you're loving little because you have no clue how much you really need. Then Jesus said to her, I wonder what this sounded like in a group of religious men, religious leaders who think they have it together. Jesus Christ looks at her, and these guys are still wondering who Jesus is because they know only God can forgive sins. And Jesus looks at her and goes, your sins, that's what these words sounded like, are forgiven. The other guests, it says, began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. What faith did this woman show, guys? What was her faith? How did she show faith?
She showed up.
She showed up. She went in her room. How much faith did it take to walk into that?
She not only went into that room, she then proceeded to violate the basic cultural behavior, which would have attracted everybody's attention before it.
Completely. What would the world be like today if we didn't see people as who and what kind? I think, Jason, you're a human being. Here's what I personally think. I think Jesus, this is my summation, maybe I've already had an encounter with her, and she was coming now to give gratitude for what he had done. And he's reaffirming this reality. Because I don't know what would get her in that room, because she couldn't have been certain that Jesus would have done what he did with her. She could maybe do that based on other encounters that she had seen him have. But I know this. She knew enough about Jesus Christ to get herself in that room to the point where he literally says, do you see this woman? This is so profound. Get this. Jesus doesn't minimize her sins. I just love this. But he also knows that that's not all that she is. There's more to her. We stopped too early. There's actually people behind all of these things. Dave?
Wait, so it just hit me. Her walking into that room, in that culture, and that, like everything you were just saying, is kind of akin in my mind to Peter walking when he steps out of the boat, except Peter looks down.
Yes.
And he realizes what he's doing, how crazy it is. She doesn't look down. Her faith has her walking on water.
Amen. So good.
I may have learned this from Eric, but I think the alabaster jar of perfume has tremendous value. It's worth like a year's labor.
Yeah. You know, here's the other thing there. It's made with oil. And you know what happens when you put on, you cook cologne that's water-based, it goes away in a couple hours. That's why you got to get different shark after dark if you're going to wear that stuff. You get oil-based stuff, it lasts a long time. I think Jesus was smelling really good for a long time. No, and I tell you what, that lingering of that love and that affection. You guys, we have no clue. I can't even verbalize it to you how much risk this woman took. Gregory?
So all of us want to be seen, and a lot of us try positive things to be seen, and if that doesn't work, the next thing is negative.
Yeah.
And so being in the school system, that's one of the things you realize pretty quickly.
Wow.
The students that are acting out all the time, they just want to be seen.
Yeah.
And so if you start to see people that way, they're just trying to get attention, and they can't get it positively, so they'll try negative. Negative always works. And so
That takes so much wisdom, Greg. That's so beautiful because often, again, the action isn't really the issue. We just think it is. And to have the patience and the awareness of the human dynamic to go a little deeper, is how things really can begin to get solved. It's so powerful. Because I think Jesus saw in her actions, her heart. I have a good buddy, Jim Green, to this day. Steve, some of you may have met my buddy Jim when we've gone on some men's weekends. By the way, they're going to do it again. I'll let you know more in March. We're going to go back to Rockbridge, Lord willing. But Jim was a guy in high school, he got involved with young life, and there was nobody more socially awkward in his high school than Jim. It was really cool. A couple of guys who come with faith began to pull their wagon up next to Jim and become his friend. Jim is 60-some years old now. He literally, his body is just all beat up, and he's really, but I'll tell you what, he's amazing. Like in high school, guys literally began to be his buddy to help him. Like, Jim, you got to brush your teeth. Jim, you got to take a shower. And they cared for him. They helped him learn how to dress even. Jim is, but I'll tell you, Jim's the best friend anybody had. Jim calls me constantly. And he'll call me for 3 minutes. He goes, Goody, how are you? I'm doing good. He goes, how are you, Jim? He goes, I'm struggling today, Goody. I thought about this, but I know the Lord loves me. And I'm doing better now, so I just want to call and he goes, I got a joke for you. Every time he has a joke. And I wish I could record these jokes because they're stupid but hilarious. And then the best thing is listening to him laugh, telling me the joke. But here's what I want to tell you. I don't know where Jim would be today had there not been some guys in high school who met Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ gave them his eyes to see Jim Green. I want to tell you, I only wish I was as good a friend in many ways as Jim Green. I've known people years and like, hey, we need to go back, and who do we call? Call Jim. Jim knows everybody. And because somebody built his spirit up enough, he is this. Here's what I know. Self-exaltation leads to other minimalization. Self-exaltation leads to other minimalization. When I am so insecure, I tend to lift myself up. You know, we don't know a person until we actually encounter them in their story. Let me draw this to you. It's a quick illustration, but if I, some of you may have seen me do this before, but if I were to ask you, how many squares do you see? What's your first initial response?
16.
Huh? 16? 21?
17.
22? 23? I'll prove it to you afterwards, 25. It's 30. There's more to this than you see. There's the big one is 1, 16 inside. You got these little ones here. Then you have quadrants that go like this. If you add them all up, promise me, we can do it later. It's 30. I'm going to erase it because that's all you guys are going to be thinking about. That goes to see if your mind's out. My point is this. I think a lot of times we look at people, the lady walks in the room, 16 squares. Here's a 16 square guy. You're a 7. We don't say it this way, but we do. What if there's more than what you see? I think there is. You know, I've gotten to really engage with some young men in the city through my son, and I've got to know some people. And this one young man, real quickly, his name's Tyree. And we had a chance to, we're working on a few little things with some job placement, career stuff with some of these younger guys that are graduated now. And we may even knock on some of your doors and say, hey, you want to mentor a young guy looking really starting to enter the work world? We're learning as we go. We've not gotten this figured out. But here's what I know is Tonto's a guy that I've known for a while, but he's so, if you got to meet him, you would fall in love with Tonto. And here's Tonto, the kind of guy, like if somebody just looked at him, they'd probably go 16 square. So I said to you, just using cultural things, I want you to picture a 22-year-old African-American from Park Heights. Okay. You think so, right? If I said, hey, you want to go take time home next week? 10 o'clock at night, Park Heights. So I'm taking time home. And 2 years ago, he goes, let me off here. I go, why? He goes, I don't want you driving down the street. I go, why not? He goes, because there's guys down there right now. I go, like, it's not on this fine, I'll drive you off. He goes, cool. He goes, no, Mr. Goody, leave me on right here. I've literally fallen in love with this young man. Took him to West Virginia. I want you to picture 8 young guys from Baltimore City in the hills of West Virginia for 5 days out in the woods. And we spent 2 of those days on the water, and most of them can't swim. So when we were rafting one day, what do you think the conversation sounded like? What the? At times, I was one of the 2 that could swim. So these are rapids from 3, 4, and 5 rapids. You got to wedge your feet under something. Tyler gets in the boat, he's across the lane, he goes, I don't put my foot underneath that thing, go do what you want. Man, first rapid is out in the water. We look at rapid and pulling back in. He's laughing at the time of his life. He's out with Josh, we started talking about some stuff. But we're driving home, and we're driving by Baltimore City jail. Man, I spent 4 months in there last year. 4 months. And he goes, I got to get my life together. We didn't do, man. We got to figure out some stuff. So what do you think we question we asked last week? Think about it with me. What do you want? To another guy we met here at Grace, still in process, who runs an electrical company. He used to be locked up. He said, I should be dead. He goes, I want to hire guys just like Tyler. I don't care if they got a record. I don't care anything. I just want to show up and work. I text Tyler almost every day now. He texted me a picture 2 weeks ago. He had a tool bag and he showed me the electrical stuff he was working on. Tyler was making his money another way, not now. And he is thanking the Lord for his life. I'm telling you, you look at him one way, you think one thing. But I think Jesus would say, Goody, do you see this man? Nobody wants to get up and blow their friggin' life up. There's not one guy helping up. Look, they make decisions. I get it. They got to own that crap. Yes. But I'm saying the thing that begins to lead to healing is when somebody sees you and validates you as a human being. And they at least try to speak into your life. Don't quit. There's something in there. Sometimes for a period of time, somebody else has got to fight for that you and you before you begin to click in. And maybe there's something to this. Maybe I'm not a sum of my mistakes. I think that's part of what Jesus was saying to this lady, to these guys in front of her. Yeah, she's a sinner, and guess what? She's also forgiven. Nobody's letting her get away with anything. I'm still learning to do this. Trust me.
You know, if anybody doesn't know, I'm in the fire department, and this is like resonating with me. We have a frequent flyer, what we call in our district.
Still loud names, you guys can hear.
We have a frequent flyer, what we're calling in our district, a heroin addict. We get them routinely, and we used to call him 70s guy because we would always see him at bell bottoms, a hat, and everything, and he looked like he was out of the 70s show. And we had one time at Towson East Motel, and his mother had called. We show up. We said, oh, it's 70s guy. And his mother looked at me and said, his name is Joshua. And it like just resonated. It was like piercing me. And you know, we devalue people by not even trying to. And, you know, ever since then, I've always called him Joshua. My engine crew has always called him Joshua. Unfortunately, we're still getting him, but it was
These problems are
watershed moment.
Oh, Dave, that is so vulnerable and powerful. Thank you. His mom said that to you.
His mom looked at me and said, his name is Joshua.
You know, his mom actually.
We've been calling him 70s guy for 6 months, a year.
When he was birthed, I don't know, we weren't there, but what do you think his mom thought when she looked at him for the first time?
Beautiful.
She didn't think heroin addict. Nobody's listening. Listen, this world's complex. I get all that, but I'm just telling you, you think of how much would not be a problem if we just learn to look at each other. And I wanted as much from Chris as I wanted from Mike. Because see, here's the deal. He and I are both, he's not a black man, a white man. What if that wasn't the biggest issue? What if the issue was we're two brothers, human beings, who when he gets cut, I get cut, it's red blood as far as I know. We can give each other's blood if we need a transfusion. That'll work. I don't turn black if you give me your blood. You don't turn white if you get mine. And we actually are human beings. That's the ultimate race. And I'm going to look at people and try to see beyond what I want to do. Because you think about this. Why is it so hard to see what God sees and value in other people? Have you ever thought about that? Why is it so freaking hard? For me too. I tell you what, it's for me, it's just pride. It just makes me feel bigger. Maybe my little boy tank is low and I'm trying to make myself feel better or something. You know, if you know the word prejudice, just break it down into prejudge. There's a lot to that. I think a lot of prejudice is rooted in prejudgment before you know the story. And when you know the story, it doesn't mean you don't come to honest conclusions. But even a conclusion doesn't mean I have to devalue a human being. Do you see the difference? This is why we don't move the needle in conversations, because we vilify with our convictions. Instead of saying, look, we totally disagree, and here's 14 reasons why. You're a human being, I'm a human being. We ought to at least be able to have a civil conversation about things we disagree about. Because maybe there's something going on that's even more important than your opinion or my opinion, which is the well-being of our culture. Let me just give you one more thing. I want to give you some time around the table. I want to read you this definition, this thing called fundamental attribution error. This is crazy. Listen to this. No, let's go back. I have to go back.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
It's all right. Let's have a hand for fundamental attribution error. Listen to this, so great. We affirm or think, this is what this means. I didn't make this up. We affirm or think the best of our actions while judging others. You ever done that? Like, listen, man, I've never caused trouble in traffic. There's always a reason why I couldn't get over or forgot to put my blinker on or stop too quick. We tend to believe others do bad things because they're bad people, but don't treat ourselves the same way. We often judge others harshly while letting ourselves off the hook, rationalizing our behavior due to other factors. Somehow when I do it, there's a good reason. When Coxie does it, not so much. He's really causing me trouble today. He's in my way. He's whatever. But when I do it, I don't do that to other people. There's a reason I can explain to you if you would just give me a few minutes.
Hey, Pat.
Yeah.
Another way to look at this is that when other people do things, you think it's because of their character.
Yes.
When we do bad things, it's because of circumstances.
That's really good. Rick just said we couldn't hear. Another way to think of this is when other people do things that we don't like, it's due to a character flaw in them. But when we do the exact same thing, it's due to circumstances. So here's what I wanted to say, guys, before we have some time around the table. I know this. I believe that there's probably a possibility that there's some of us in this room that have felt unseen, or maybe even unwelcome ourselves due to failures, things in our own life. And here's what I know. You and I change again to the degree that we know we're loved. We change to the degree that we know that we're loved. And this woman displayed a humble courage, and the Lord saw it. And I just want to say this. Our Lord sees you. Mark, you, Mike, Zach, me, and he sees the deepest, the most frightened, the insecure, confused, questioning, and the wondering parts of us. Get this. He actually embraces it. Isn't that beautiful? So I want to just give you some time to just enjoy some time around tables for a little bit. Just debrief us a little bit. We'll throw some questions up on the board. Have that however you feel. Then I'll call us back and we'll have a little housekeeping here, but enjoy 20, 25 minutes just talking together. All right? Enjoy this.
Hey, you guys, we're hooked in.
Morning, Ron.
Good morning. Hey, Randy?
Hey.
Hold on a second here. So I've got my table on my on my FaceTime, but okay. Somebody was going to lead this questioning.
I think Josh asked if I could do it, Ron, if that's okay.
That's good, Ben. Go ahead.
Awesome. Well, how's everybody doing this morning?
Doing well.
Good. I am not very good at keeping structure, so I'm not going to walk through each of these in order if we don't need to, but I do love the first one. And I think it's a good conversation starter, just kind of what struck you from what we talked about today. I would say just open up to the floor to anybody, just if there's anything that you guys kind of stood out or kind of something you wrote down and want to share. I think that'd be awesome.
I turned it down.
Yeah. So Mark, I can see you felt visible. Yeah, let's see. Mark, yeah, when I was a kid, I was one of the short guys. Never had big control last. Pick up that.
Ron, is that your table?
We are formed by our opinions by our experiences, and our experiences revolve around other perfect on the planet. So we have to forget all the BS we learned. And we can look at somebody we believe. We don't judge. That causes us to
So Ron, I'm not sure if we can actually hear what's going on with the questions or, okay. Thank you. So anybody have anything that stuck out or struck them from the conversation today?
I like the fireman story about saying, he called him 70s guy, and then his mom says his name's Joshua. And it's always good to call people by name, whether they're a waitress or whoever is in your life. Learn their names and call them by name. I thought that was cool.
I couldn't imagine what that would feel like. You're just kind of going to a routine call. You think you know somebody, and then the mom calls you out on that. Oh. think for me, one of the interesting things that he talked about was the squares and how maybe we see somebody for a 7 or a 16, but there's really 30 squares there. And I don't know if I've ever thought about it like that, but that was just interesting to me, and how many times. And I think it was Rick Fink kind of said too, like, well, yeah, we see the flaws in them because it's of their actions, but I have a reason for why I did my thing. So I think it's a combination for me that I see people for less than, and I explain to myself why, but I don't see those same things inside of me. And if I do it, there's a reason for it. I try to justify it. So I think that kind of struck me a little bit when I heard those two things this morning. Talkative bunch this morning. I like it. This is good.
Man, morning everybody. I was struck this morning by I've heard we've heard the story of the woman at the well, and then the woman washing Jesus' feet with her hair. Heard it a lot. And one thing I love about scripture is you can hear it so many times, and then there's something new that you find from it. And the way Pat described it, I never realized how basically scandalous it was for her to do that. I always knew it was impactful, but I didn't know some of the full meaning behind that. And so what emotional state she must have been in to just put all that aside and not care about any of those things to do that in that sense. So that was just one thing that struck me.
And I think context is so cool. Like I think without that context, that story means it's almost watered down a little bit. Like, okay, so this woman was there and like this thing happened, but like, yeah, with that extra context, it's almost like, and then you try to put that in perspective, what that would look like today. And you're like, that's kind of crazy. And I never would have gotten it. Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Siding looks great behind you, by the way. Well done.
Thanks. It's a little better than Tyvek, huh?
Anybody else? I think the next question is a tough one sometimes. Are you prone to judge a person by how they appear or from what you've heard, which may not be true? Or do you try your best to get to know the person a little before you come to a conclusion? I mean, I'm sure we all do the second part of that, right? None of us do the first part.
I think on the surface we kind of we have stereotypes that we kind of order our life by. But when it comes down to having a conversation with and knowing their story and what they've been through in their life, then all the prior, I would call them premature decisions or conclusions, let them tell their story, and then you'll get a more real picture, and that'll become a more intimate thing too.
Yeah. There was and Pat talked about talking to a homeless person or something else, and it made me think. There was a couple, probably 2-3 years ago, I was with my younger daughters, and there was a homeless woman that was asking for money or whatever else, panhandling on the side of the road. And she just looked like she was in a tough spot. And so we actually turned the car around, went back over to her and kind of parked it in somewhat traffic, which was probably not the best thing to do from a traffic standpoint. But and just had a conversation with her and found out that she had gotten into a really bad car accident, had to have, I think, part of a leg and part of an arm amputated. And so she could no longer do her job. So she wasn't able to earn money. It's like this whole story of like, holy cow, how would I handle that situation if it was me? Who's to say I wouldn't be in the same boat where I can't provide for my family? And it was really interesting because I think it goes back to, you have a whole different perspective of somebody and you feel compassion for them versus just judging them once you do understand maybe a little bit more about their story and how they got there. And I think that helps, and that's necessary before we actually get into judging, which I'm totally guilty of doing it 9 times out of 10, I feel like.
Yeah, I went downtown to feed some churches. It's the Grace in Shrewsbury, some other churches. We go downtown and on Eager Street and feed people, just fix them a lunch. I was talking to this guy, Donnie, and Donnie had a cane. He's probably 55, black guy. He goes, I said, Donnie, you're limping. What's up? And he goes, he told me this terrible accident. He grew up 6 blocks from where we were, and where he got caught between a car and a motorcycle collided. He got caught in the chain. And then he says, I said, Don, I'm sorry that happened to you. He goes, but he goes, I was doing the wrong thing. I said, what were you doing wrong? He goes, I was dealing drugs. And then we talked some more, and I said, you got kids or grandkids? And he has a daughter in Catonsville, and she has 3 of his grandkids. And I said, do you see him? He goes, my daughter and I aren't getting along too well because I don't think she's forgiven me as how I acted as a young man. And it was sad. And then I thought, I grew up in Towson, and I grew up in a culture that said, do the right thing, work hard in school, get a job. And Donnie grew up in a culture that the way to make money is just to deal drugs. And he moved on. He was a stevedore at Fort McHenry. It was a great story, but it's just, I was more compassionate when you listen to someone.
Gary, any thoughts from you? I'm not going to start calling people, I promise, but I thought you look like a man with wisdom, and I wanted to hear from you if possible. All righty. And I think Josh hit on this a little bit. But what about the encounter in Luke 7 stood out to you the most? And what do you think Jesus' question of, do you see this woman, was meant to convey?
It's interesting when you say that context of a woman in a culture in the Mideast that may be true today, similar to what it was back in the Jesus time, where women are property or seen as second class. And it's kind of like saying, do you see what she's doing now versus do you see her through what you've experienced and her guilty reputation? There's a hope for change for people. And we shouldn't, have people live condemning with their past, but there was change. And she was very gracious and bold.
I don't think I ever noticed it before either, when he starts comparing what she did to what the host didn't do. And it was interesting that Pat mentioned, like, we don't know the reason behind the Pharisee inviting Jesus in. Maybe it was to try to trap him. Maybe it was to make him look foolish. But it doesn't sound like he was a very good host to somebody of who Jesus was, right? He didn't do anything that you normally would do and were normal customs of that day. So it almost seemed, as Pat was reading it, like, did this guy really even care that Jesus was there, or was there an alternative motive? And it almost seems like Jesus called that out in the process of also elevating this woman. So it's almost like he got a little 2-for-1 there, where he was like, you didn't do this for me, she did. And it almost, I think, called out that if he really cared, he would have done these things, but he clearly didn't. She did care and did do these things. So I think that was interesting to me too, because I don't know if I ever fully got what he was saying or how he was calling out the host of that, who was supposed to be a religious leader and knew better. Cool, we'll move right along. How aware are you of the fundamental attribution error in your own life? How might this be impacting your relationships?
And could you redefine the fundamental attribution error?
Yeah, I was just looking to see if Josh put that in the notes at all, and I don't know if I wrote that down. I'm wondering if this is the one that Pat talked about, where you see the issue or the flaw in somebody else, but then you don't recognize it in your own life, I believe. And maybe we'll just go with that. But yeah, I think that's what they're referencing here. And Britnell, I know it's going to be hard for you because you don't have any errors or flaws. So if you could put yourself into somebody else's shoes, that would be great for this one.
You're so correct. I feel like I just got called on, but sorry, I'm on my porch. It's raining, so sorry if the background noise is pretty high. You can let me know. But I think I've become more and more aware of that, and I think today's age of like social media and Twitter, like it's so easy to just get online, and it's very visible in those that are scenarios where people just, we live in cancel culture, which is just kind of like a buzzword for it, but anytime anybody does anything remotely wrong, you jump on them, but there's a lot of psychology behind that too. So if you are maybe attacking someone or you are judging someone, maybe unfairly, like there's probably some of that in your own heart, and it's hard without consciously trying to check that. It can really just kind of run away from you. I think that's an ongoing battle of trying to recognize it. And then the follow-up question on that I really like is how is it impacting relationships? Because how often do you do that subconsciously with family, friends, or coworkers, whatever? You have no idea that you're just kind of silently judging them, and not going back and not actually seeing them like we're talking about.
That's good, JB.
The fundamental attribution error says that we assume people's behavior is driven only by their personality, not for the situation in which we find them. So, oh, well, he does that because that's his nature, that's his character, rather than he does that because there's an iron bar sitting on his foot. So he's screaming because he's a screamer rather than because the situation he's in is causing him to scream. So we attribute the behavior to what's inside comes out. And no matter who we encounter, whatever it is they're doing, we say, oh, that's just the way they are.
Harry, thank you, buddy. That helps clear up the definition. So would you say, do you see that impacting any relationships that you have?
Oh, sure. And I hear it all the time. My partner says, well, that's just the way you are all the time. And I think, that doesn't really take into account the circumstances of why I just did what I did. And I do the same thing. Well, that's just you doing you rather than that's just you responding to the situation, the stress, whatever that you are currently having. So when someone's screaming at you, we can do it either way.
Yeah, we can do that in our political discourse. Oh, you said that because you're a Republican, or you said that because you're a Democrat. And really, we have to, it's really us just taking a shallow understanding of what we perceive of a person and then attributing all their statements to our presumptions. And really, we just need to listen. Why do you say that? You know, we have to listen to people.
I think that's great. Sorry, go
and
ahead.
another thing is that we're you know, the statement, love the sinner, hate the sin. This one guy said it differently. He says, why don't you say love the sinner, hate the sin in me? Because it's easier to talk about other people's sins than our own. It's kind of like an external projection or something.
That's pretty hard hitting. Never quite thought of it like that. I think this last question here was interesting to me as I was listening to you guys talk. Do you believe Jesus sees you as you truly are and embraces you still? I think for guys, that's going to be hard to answer truthfully sometimes. I don't know. What say you for you guys? Because I think there's two parts to unpack there. Like, do you believe that Jesus truly sees you as you are? And then do you think that he embraces you even still?
Well, for me, that goes back to the old Christmas song. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been good or bad, so be good for goodness sake. In other words, yes, I am totally seen, in that case by Santa Claus, but in this case by God. And that's just how it is. And that stays with me. How about you guys?
I think, you know, he sees me as I am. I mean, how can I hide from that? If he's all knowing and all present, what does he not know about me? What can I hide? Now, the question is, I have my personal guilt and his great love. And what wins out there? So I think his love is more powerful than my guilt.
That liquid sunshine, it's out there waiting for us today. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this. We're going to keep after this. And I just want to remind you that if I get one of these cards, get out there, we'll have some every week. If you want to take a couple extra ones, maybe have a friend you want to give it to, that's fine as well. You can use these as Christmas presents or birthday presents, anything you want. Seriously, still free to take a couple of these. And enjoy this. We'll be back again together for the billing next week. And as I said, please feel free to keep inviting guys. Some guys don't even know that we're meeting or forgot. And we just will be back together. Okay, let me do this. I want to just tell you, take maybe a deep breath. And I'd love for maybe just to ask the question. That noise that you hear is the rain, by the way. It's like a train going at the radio. But just take 30 seconds. Maybe just ask the Lord. Lord, is there something that you want me to take from today? What is that? I'd love it if maybe 2 or 3 of you or just share a sentence, maybe something that you're feeling compelled by or leaving with today, a word of encouragement, maybe something the Lord's given to you today. Today I'm leaving with what I was struck by. Anybody willing to share just a quick thought, maybe 2 or 3 of you real quickly? Just love to kind of have a sense of what we're hearing today together. Anybody? Thank you.
I'd like to be an observer more than a watcher.
Amen. To be an observer more than just a watcher. Yeah, observing takes a little more attention. It's good. Thank you. Anybody else? Just a thought, insight. Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Just start seeing more from the marriage perspective.
Yeah.
Marriage perspective.
Wow. Yeah, Chris just shared good here to see from an advantage perspective because of a relationship with the Lord. We really do have an advantage perspective of who people really are. It's interesting in 2 Corinthians, Paul says, we no longer look at any man according to what he is in the flesh. That, you know, that what Jesus has done for all of us is true, even if people don't see it or know it yet. That there's a reality about that, maybe even they don't know yet. That's beautiful. Thank you. How about maybe one more? Right. Yeah, Dave?
Just remembering that Chick-fil-A commercial, every life has a story.
Yes.
If we bother to read it.
Wow. Every life has a story.
If we bother to read it.
If we bother to read it. And Chick-fil-A, some of you may not know, we have to show this again at some point. Every new employee has to watch a video. And part of it is they basically pan a restaurant and they have zoom in on people and they share a caption about that person's life. Like her husband just died after 50 years of marriage, just got into college, you know, just got out of something over drugs, just got divorced, just had their first child. And you just, it's all in there. And it's really, and the part of it's to teach their employees that they're not just dealing with clients. These are human beings that are coming into there to encounter and to serve. So it's pretty powerful. Well, man, this is great that we're together. Thank you for being willing to get up. You guys that are new today, we really are grateful you're here. And we hope that you'll come back. It's good to be together. It really truly is. And I want to just say a prayer for us, and then we'll do our verse and we'll call it a day, all right? Again, there's cards out there and a memory verse if you did not get it. And I'm going to say a little bit more. I'm trying to maybe work up a sheet that can help us think about how do we begin to develop an immeasurably more vision for maybe your life, your marriage, your relationship with your kids, pick an area, and how to really maybe begin to believe God for that. So, Eric, if we could have our verse, and let's stand, and we will recite this together as it gets in us, and that'll be our amen. The one thing I will say, we need to take these 3 tables on the right down, we could with the chairs. And Steve, your table back there, and Dan, if we can take yours down, we can leave 6 of them up, that would be great. So we'll take 5 down and leave the rest up. So let's do this, ready? Now to him. Let's do it together, let's start over. Okay, let's do it together, right? So, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. To him be glory in the church in Christ Jesus throughout all generations. Gentlemen.